Clemens Först, you are the CEO of RailCargoGroup. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, it's a bit of a non-linear career. I actually started out in science. So I studied chemistry and mathematics, did my PhD in theoretical physics, spent 2 years also at MIT as a researcher, before then going into consulting, making junior partner at McKinsey, and then I had sort of this classical consultant destiny of doing a really cool engagement, in that case with ÖBB, and then getting an offer to switch sides. So I then spent 2 years as head of strategy of ÖBB Group, Austrian Federal Railways, before then going really into cargo, first in Eastern Europe, also building up our international traction activities. Then a short stint as head of production of DB Cargo before returning in 2017 as CEO of RailCargoGroup.
Okay, and what made you choose for rail, actually?
Well, actually, during my consultancy time, I really quickly gravitated towards logistics, and sort of the way I sort of interpret this move is very much coming out of physics, coming out of sort of highly quantitative field of research. I sort of felt attracted by the complexity of logistics, right? Because it's by definition a high fixed cost business. So you have lots of fixed costs. You really need to manage those fixed costs at the same time, sort of find the revenues to match those costs. And that level of complexity appealed to me. Therefore, sort of I gravitated towards logistics. And then within logistics, rail turned up essentially just because of a choice of engagements. So then I became sort of more and more rail focused until I ended up doing the engagement for ÖBB. And that was then sort of the start of ÖBB time. Yeah.
And did you ever regret going for cargo rather than passenger traffic?
No, never. Because what I really like about cargo is it is so much international, right? It is then, in my opinion, also so much more complex in terms of organizing first last mile services, in making competitive products towards trucking, that for me personally, cargo is sort of way more exciting than passenger.
Yeah. How do you feel you've done so far in these last 3 years?
Well, I guess RCG is on a good path, and I personally, I'm learning every day. Yeah, so it's a huge opportunity. I'm enjoying it a lot, and still learning a lot on how to really navigate in this extremely difficult industry at once, right? Within a really large player, second largest player of the industry, and then especially obviously in challenging times that we're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, and are there certain things that keep you awake at night?
Well, I tend to sleep very well. Obviously, what is a real challenge at the moment is finding the right balance between cost savings, between short-term survival mode in this crisis, and I guess the sector is in survival mode at the moment, and still putting enough resources, money, and attention towards the really important mid and long-term projects, because rail needs to modernize, rail needs to work on its future fitness, both the sector and the company, and now sort of balancing out these two really strong interests. That's the key challenge at the moment.
Yeah. Now you already mentioned it. This is extra difficult, most probably in these times, because we have the pandemic and economic crisis. Yet we have the European Year of Rail, huge opportunity. How do you plan to make use of this momentum?
Well, I don't actually see sort of a conflict of interest, right? Because despite all the difficulties, and I'm fully aware we are far from being through this pandemic, But sort of what this pandemic has really shown is that rail is not only really crucial to address the climate crisis, but rail really also showed the systemic relevance during the crisis, where we as a sector, and especially also we as RailCargoGroup, were really able to operate throughout this crisis, deliver every ton of freight. So I think that the systemic relevance of freight has really been proven. And that is sort of now an additional argument next to climate change for rail, for the change, and sort of an additional argument also within the European Year of Rail.
Yeah, so it's actually a unique opportunity.
Well, it definitely is for many reasons. Sort of now, if we probably go a step back, right? It is pretty obvious to everyone that our almost 75% reliance on road transport in Europe is not sustainable, right? We are a global laggard. It's not sustainable because of emissions. It's not sustainable because of congestions, of traffic safety, and so on and so forth. So that's just not sustainable. However, it has been for quite some time, and we have known for quite some time that it's not sustainable. The reason I'm deeply convinced that now is the time where change is going to happen, and why I'm really deeply convinced that the 2020s will really show a renaissance of rail freight, is because I think we have now sort of all building blocks, all puzzle pieces in place to really make change happen, right? Because we have a really strong conviction on the policy side, both on the European level and on the national levels. Yeah, you see lots of national measures, lots of policy measures on the European side. I think we are as rail freight operators, we have developed a lot over the last 5-10 years, especially driven by competition from trucking, driven by intense liberalization. We have developed a lot, and then lastly, we see, starting from the consumer, but now really also with the shippers, we really observe that green or sustainable transport does have a value. Yeah, and sort of talking to customers, if you talk to a customer 5 years ago, well, we are rail and we save so much CO2 on this transport, didn't make a difference, right? It was sort of price, it was transit time, it was reliability. CO2 was almost zero topic. And this has fundamentally changed, right? We are not yet at a point where a significant portion of shippers is willing to pay a price premium for green transport, but we are now at a stage where shippers are seriously considering shifting, are seriously considering also tolerating the partially increased complexity of multimodal transport compared to simple road transport. And I think we are now in a really sort of in a midterm of the transition, and I'm pretty sure now, given all the change, given all the mindset change also in society, then in a couple of years down the road, also the topic of price premium will be on the table.
There's been a lot of focus on this 2030. There should be 30% of the rail shares, of the transport shares on rail. Do you believe in this 2030 goal?
Yes, I definitely do. And I do because of the reasons I've mentioned before, because I think at the moment all the forces in play are working towards a common goal, which is making Europe more sustainable. And since transport is 10% of emissions, then obviously transport is a focus area. Yeah? The 30%, right, that's not just any number. 30% is a number we are currently experiencing or seeing in Austria, which is a average Western European economy, which is a number which is even higher in Switzerland. So that's not out of the ballpark, right? The key question is still, and by the way, if you go to Trucker Paradise US, you're 50%. Yeah, so 30% is not a number which is sort of purely visionary. That's something which is currently achieved in Europe. But the key question we've been asking ourselves within Rail Freight Forward is what needs to be done to achieve it. Yeah, that it can be achieved, for me, it's a given. And essentially, there are three pillars that we sort of iterate and reiterate within Rail Freight Forward. We need three pillars. The first thing is we need to do our homework as railway undertakings. And I've been talking about that, right? Innovative products, digitalization, asset innovation, and so on. So we need to do that. The important thing is, while this is the first lever we mentioned, and definitely extremely important, even if we do a perfect job in doing our homework as railway undertakings, we still won't move the needle, right? Maybe we go from 18 to 19% modal share in Europe, but it won't be a game changer because we need two other levers and we are dependent on them. The second lever is a high-performing infrastructure. We are running on rails, right? Railway infrastructure today in Europe is incredibly segmented. You have different electricity systems, different train control systems, different rules and regulations, and so on and so forth. So it's extremely complex to run a train through Europe. Our vision there, which we are actively communicating against to all stakeholders, also the infrastructure managers, is running a train through Europe should be as easy as going by truck. Simple claim, lots of things to do for infrastructure managers. And then the third pillar, again, we need all three to be stable, right? You need obviously three, we need fair economic boundary conditions or sort of fair competition towards trucking. What I mean by that is that if you, as a person now, send a shipment per truck, right, you are not paying for the full cost of that shipment. Yes, you're paying for microeconomic costs, you're paying a driver's salary, you're paying fuel, and so on and so forth. What you're not paying for is you're not paying for the CO2 emissions, you're not paying for the congestion costs, you're not paying for any other external costs, right? Society, European society is paying for that. And these so-called external costs, again, emission, road safety, congestion, these external costs, they are currently paid for by the European society. These external costs are significantly lower for rail transport. So, and what we are arguing for, and what regulation in Austria is sort of moving towards, is to create a boundary condition where you, as a shipper, taking you as example now, you really have the full transparency of the total cost. Yeah, and so you can either subsidize rail. That's something which is done in Austria. So you make rail cheaper, and therefore you create a level playing field, or you can do things like a CO2 taxation or so to make trucking more expensive and again level out the playing field. So there are lots of ways to do it, but it needs to be a fair competition. If it's not fair, obviously you don't get a macroeconomically optimal transport mix.
Yeah.
So these are the three pillars. If we succeed to progress on all three of them, 30 by 2030 is easy.
Okay. And where do you think you'll be in 2030?
As rail freight sector or as RCG?
As Clemens Först.
Me, myself in 2030. Although I really like doing strategy work, sort of since I was a consultant and also now, I'm extremely unstrategic career-wise. So far I've sort of come upon opportunities which seemed interesting to me, and I sort of jumped on them, and it went well for me so far. So I plan on doing so. However, that being said, I sort of massively enjoy my job. It's really a great job. I can really move a lot, both internally and also on a European level. So I'm enjoying myself, and I'm not actively looking for a change.